picture you see in the title page is an example of a runtime error that occurred by a web page application that is trying to fetch a web page from a server, but the page is not found. The page is not found probably due to a wrong address is given or written in the program. Therefore, the application could not continue and it crashed with a page not found runtime error. Runtime errors occur while a program is running if the Java virtual machine detects an operation that is impossible to carry out. For example, if you access an array using an index that is out of bounds, you will get a runtime error with an array index out of bound exception. If you enter a double value when your program expects an integer, you will get a runtime error with an input mismatch exception. In Java, runtime errors are thrown as exceptions. An exception is an object that represents an error or a condition that prevents execution from proceeding normally. If the exception is not handled, the program will terminate abnormally. How can you handle the exception so the program can continue to run or else terminate gracefully? So what are exceptions? Exceptions are basically runtime errors that occurs in your program and make your program crashes. And what is exception handling? Exception handling is a mechanism that enables your program to deal with such runtime errors and make it continue its normal execution. So for today's lecture, we will explain the meaning of exceptions. Specifically, we will show you how to handle or catch an exception when it occurs. Then we will show you how to raise or throw an exception in your programs that can be handled as an exception. But before going into details about these concepts, we would like to introduce our discussion by an example showing you how to handle a predefined exception that occurs when the user enters double value while the program expects an integer due to the next int method of the scanner object. Let us go to JGrasp and write this smaller program and show you how this exception happens and how to handle it to avoid crashing your program. This program is a very simple program. It simply asks the user to enter the number of credit hours for ITCS 114 and reads it into a variable called the credits as integer using the method nextInt from the scanner object. Then this number of credits is tested. If it is equal to 3, a message will be printed, excellent, you are absolutely right. Otherwise, another message is printed, oops, it is incorrect, check the course outline. Now, this program is expected that the user enter an integer, but you as a programmer, you cannot guarantee that the user will give integer. What if the user gives, let's say, for example, something including characters like text, or double that includes dot? Then how your program will react? Now, if your program crashes, then this is very bad, and this program is considered a bad program. You should never let your program stops execution or crashes in the middle of its execution. Otherwise, it will be considered a bad program, and it's not a good idea that it stops abnormally. You have to catch this error. So if the user enters not integer and an error occurs, then you have to catch this error rather than make your program crashes. Let us run the program and see what happens if we don't give the input as an integer. So we will run the program. It is now asking for the number of credits. Now if I give 3.5, so 3.5 is not an integer. Now when we press enter, and as you can see, the program crashes and it stops execution. And here we have a runtime error. And if you can see in here that it says exception in a thread main. Main is the main method. And this is what the exception name. So this is the object of the exception that occurred and made your program crashes. It is called input mismatch exception. And this happens because it is expected to read integer, but the user gave us real number. And it is not good idea that you make your program crashes in the middle of its execution without catching this error. So you have to catch your error and display a message to the user that this input is incorrect. Either you let the user try again or you terminate it by yourself instead of making the program terminate by itself. So how to catch this error, or in other words, how to handle this exception? In Java, we handle this exception by using a try and catch structure. Let me show you how to do this. You know, when the exception happened, it happened due to the next int method. So this method what causes this exception to occur. So we will put this statement inside a try. So here we will say try, and we will open curly brackets because it will include a bunch of statements, and we will include all of these statements inside a try. And then we will follow try by another keyword catch, and we will open round bracket like a parameter in method, and here we should write the name of the exception, the class that this exception belongs to, because if you remember we said that exceptions were objects, so objects were created from classes, and the name of the class of that object is input mismatch exception. So I will simply copy it from the output screen, and we are going to paste it, and we are going to give it a name like an input parameter, and we are going to call it E. And then we will open and close brackets for catch. Let us format it. So now it is formatted. As you can see inside the try, we have put the statement that caused the exception, and in catch here, we will come to this catch when the exception occurs. But this exception, input mismatch, is defined inside java.util package. So we have to include it as well. So we have to say here import java.util dot the name of the exception class. Or you can include these two by using import java.util dot star, and it will include all the classes that belong to java.util package. So now here we need to write the code so that when the exception happens, then it will come to this code. So simply we will print a message, and we will say system.out.println, and we will say invalid input. The input should be integer. So when the computer comes to line 9, it will go inside a try. It will execute all statements inside a try. If any of the statements inside a try raises an exception or throws an exception, then control immediately will go to catch and will skip all statements after the statement that caused the exception. It will execute the statements inside catch, and then it will leave catch statement. Let us run the program and try to trace it and see how the exception is handled. Let us compile the program. It does not have any errors. We will run the canvas viewer to trace our program. So we will go into the program step by step. So now we are at line 12. It is waiting for reading. So here we will put 3.5 and we will press enter. Now see what happened. It jumped immediately inside catch. Why? Because an exception was thrown or raised from the method next int. Because something wrong has happened, and next int found that it should not continue and has thrown an exception, and the control of execution is immediately transferred to the statements inside catch. And see what happens inside catch. A print statement is executed, and a message is printed on the output screen by saying invalid input. The input should be integer. Here the program did not crash. However, we called the exception instead of making our program crashes. Now how to make it read again? Because as you see that when the exception occurred, the handling of this exception is just simply printing a message. So how to make it that we repeat and ask the user again for input when this exception happens? We need a loop. And we will show you now how to design this loop so that we put the try and catch inside the loop. Now we are back after stopping the canvas viewer. And to put the try and catch inside the loop, we can put that inside a while loop or inside do while. But it is preferable to use do while. Why? Because we first enter the loop, we read the integer, probably there is an exception, probably not. So we need to enter the loop at least once. So let us do it. So first we will say do, and then at the end of catch, we will close the do while and provide a condition. Now we need to put a condition so that if there is no exception, we should exit the loop. But if there is an exception, then we have to continue and go back to the beginning of the loop and try read again. So we will use Boolean variable. This variable, we will call it continue input. And if it is true, then we need to continue reading again. And when it becomes false, we will go out. So we will define it at the beginning of the loop as Boolean. And we will say continue input. And initially we will assume that we need to continue. So we assume that an exception will happen. But if there is no exception, that means after this statement is skipped, which is line number 14, if there is no exception happened, then we need to change this variable, the flag, and make it equal to false. Why? Because when we skip this statement, next int, that means it did not raise any exception. So therefore, we have to go out from the loop. So we set the flag continue input to false. And once we go to the while loop, the condition is false, it will go out. However, if there is an exception, as you can see that these steps will be skipped and immediately will jump to catch. It will print a message and continue has not been changed and it still was true. So we return back to the beginning of the loop. So let us format it first. And now let us run the program and see how it works. We will compile it. And now we will run it for testing. Here it says, what is the credit hours for ITCS 114? Let's say 3.5. And as you can see, it is not stopping. So why it is not stopping? It is going inside catch in every iteration. The reason is that for next int, when it reads 3.5, it saves it inside the object. And when the exception happened or occurred, it jumped into the catch statement, but it is still the input is there. So we have to remove it from there. So therefore, inside catch, we have to write something to take out the input that the user has entered. So we will stop it. And the solution for this is that inside catch, we have to get rid of the value that was entered by the user so that in the next iteration, we read a new value. Simply, you just say read.next. And you know that .next is used for reading a complete word. And we don't need to save it in anywhere. Just let it go. And this will just take out from the buffer inside the object scan for the scanner. It will take it out. And in the next iteration, we are going to read a new one. Let us run it again. Again, we will say 3.5. And as you can see, it says invalid input. The input should be integer. And then it returned back because the value of continue input is still true. Now let us put 6. As you can see, 6 is an integer. So read integer did not raise any exception. Therefore, we did not go inside catch. We stayed inside the try. And it was tested against 3. Since 6 is not equal to 3, it will go to else. And a message printed on the screen. Oops, it is incorrect. Check the course outline. Then the value of continue input is changed to false. And then when we go to the condition of the while loop, it is false. And it will go outside the loop. So this is how to handle an exception when it occurs. Whenever you have a statement that raises an exception, put it inside a try. And to catch this exception, then you have to handle it by a catch statement. And then inside the catch statement, you put the reaction that you want to do whenever this exception has occurred.